Filth are my politics. Filth is my life.
Shocking.
House robbing, new gun, murder.
Shameless.
I was having an erotic dream.
And absolutely delicious.
Oh, the Eggman! The Eggman!
In 1960s Baltimore, a 16-year-old puppeteer named John Waters picked up a camera and started making amateur underground movies with his friends, a troupe of outcasts who called themselves the Dreamlanders. After years of playing to church basements and micro theaters, audiences around the country started to take notice when John released 3 groundbreaking movies: The Trinity of Trash, Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, and Desperate Living. Even if you don't know John Waters by name, you might recognize this iconic image. This is Divine, starring in one of his early movies, Pink Flamingos. Or if you don't recognize Divine, you might recognize the character she inspired.
And don't underestimate the importance of body language.
The Little Mermaid's Ursula. Or you might have seen John's guest appearance on The Simpsons.
I have something that I'd like to sell.
Please tell me it's your hair.
Or maybe you saw the movie Hairspray, starring Zac Efron and Queen Latifah, which is a remake of a Broadway adaptation of John Waters' 1988 movie of the same name, starring Divine.
Could you turn that racket down? I'm trying to iron in here.
When John's films first came out, audiences had an intense reaction.
Oh, it's marvelous. Absolutely.
Disgusting thing I've ever seen in my whole life.
So how do they lead to an iconic Disney villain, an appearance on a family sitcom, and a cheerful musical now performed in schools across the country? And why are we still talking about these scandalous movies to this day? Well, for one thing, they included such shocking acts that censors needed someone to explain to them what they were seeing.
I didn't know what to put down they were doing. I didn't even know.
For another, they had more queer characters than had ever appeared in any mainstream movie.
The world of heterosexual is a sick and boring life.
But one of the most striking things about the movies is the shameless way that the heroes pursue whatever brings them pleasure. How they go after whatever they want with gleeful freedom, and that they're totally unconcerned with the approval of mainstream society. No matter how desperate their circumstances, no matter how much trouble they cause, they're always having a fantastic time. It's Divine's world, we're just living in it.
I will be queen one day.
Hey friends, I'm Matt Baum. I make videos about pop culture, and this time we're looking at how John Waters' early films harnessed the power of shamelessness to become icons of trash cinema.
I have never found the antics of deviants to be one bit amusing.
And if you want to watch these movies, I have links to some of them in the description, and also a link to my Patreon, where I'll be posting some of the stuff that I discovered that either didn't fit in this video or that I just can't show on YouTube. So before we can talk about the Trinity of Trash, let me catch you up on who John Waters is and what made his work unique. Even as a young child, he had a certain reputation. He loved evil witches. When he was 6, he begged his parents to take him to the local junkyard to see wrecked cars because he was obsessed with car crashes. And as he got older, he put on puppet shows based on horror films for the neighborhood kids. John's parents didn't know what to do with their gory little child, but they got some good advice from doctors.
And I remember asking the pediatrician about it, and he said, if he wants to smash up cars, let him.
Strange as he was, John's parents loved him, and they saw what made him happy. So, after he turned 16, his grandmother gave him a film camera, and his parents loaned him some money so he could start making movies with the other weird kids who were his friends. John had 2 obsessions around this time: schlocky B-movies from the 1950s, and also experimental art films by Andy Warhol. He decided to combine them and give them a twist by adding a ton of ridiculous melodrama, queer characters, and all the deranged filth that he had to keep under wraps as a Catholic schoolboy. His first movies were full of images that would have been pretty shocking back in the 1960s. A drag queen nun, a deranged nanny who forces her victims to model themselves to death, an attack by a giant lobster.
I'm just trying to give people a good time, make them laugh, and give them a little shock value for their money's worth.
The cast were all his friends, and the star of his movie was a neighborhood kid who did drag under the name Divine, and who loudly rebelled against what were the drag standards of the time. You can see what drag looked like back then in the 1968 documentary The Queen. Elegant, glamorous beauty pageants where performers competed in tasteful ball gowns and exquisite jewels. Divine wore clownish makeup and garish outfits. John's films show a character who's big and bold and brash and absolutely shameless.
I wanted him to be the Godzilla of drag queens. I wanted other drag queens to run in tears. And other drag queens were so square then. They wanted to be Miss America, and they wanted to be Donald Trump. Basically, that were their values. And they hated Divine.
John's early shorts picked up a following in little local cafes and small theaters, but he wanted to make something bigger. And he finally got a shot in 1972 thanks to a newly created company called New Line Cinema. Today, you might know New Line as the company that made the Lord of the Rings movies, But in the 1970s, the company was basically one guy named Bob Shaye working out of his apartment, sending copies of the drug movie Reefer Madness to college campuses. Bob told John that he could distribute his next film, it just needed to be a little more polished. So what John made was Pink Flamingos. Now if you're planning to watch these movies, and I recommend you do, provided you know what you're getting into, first I should give you a little heads up.
Now a warning?
In addition to being daring and influential and very unique, there's some content in these films that is hard for me to even describe without upsetting YouTube's robot, and perhaps some of you watching this video. I'd recommend looking up a summary before you watch, and if you're concerned about spoilers, I wouldn't worry. The plots are light, and you'll still get plenty of surprises in the execution.
You would step down from your throne for the love of a mutant?
So, now that you're prepared, let's discuss what I like to call the Trinity of Trash. 3 films that John Waters produced in the 1970s that brought him national fame, created a culture of midnight movies, and made trash into something trendy.
A little gross, but I liked it.
We'll start with 1972's Pink Flamingos. We open on a trailer where the notorious criminal Divine is hiding out with her family. Divine has just been named the filthiest person alive, with good reason. We see her taunting hitchhikers, stealing dinner between her legs, and relieving herself in public. But Divine isn't embarrassed by the title. She's thrilled. As far as she's concerned, it's the highest possible honor. She's the living embodiment of be gay, do crime. But unbeknownst to Divine, a scheming, well-to-do couple from the suburbs named Connie and Raymond Marble think they're entitled to the honor of being named the filthiest people alive. They run a network of adult bookstores, they fund heroin dealers in elementary schools, but their main mayhem is also more cruel, kidnapping women and forcing them to produce babies for lesbian couples. They're not just dirty like Divine, they're also abusive and exploitative, and they are furious about Divine's recognition.
We'll see who's the filthiest person alive. We'll just see!
This is a world where filthiness is a status symbol. Divine revels in it. Look at her walking down the street, beaming as every head turns to stare. Her filthiness is an asset. When someone compliments her cooking, she boasts about how she came by the meat.
Smells delicious, Babs.
Oh, thank you, Cotton. It should. I warmed it up when I was downtown today in my own little oven.
The Marbles want what Divine has. They're determined to be recognized as the filthiest people alive. They send her a disgusting present in the mail with a taunting note.
You are no longer the filthiest person alive. We are. Signed, the filthiest people alive.
Oh, just as I thought. And a deliberate attempt to seize my title.
Undaunted, Divine throws a birthday party for herself, and the Marbles attempt to sabotage it with what is in this world the most reprehensible act yet.
I'd like to report a lewd and disorderly party.
Calling the police. For all their filthiness, this is the first time that a character crosses an important line in a John Waters film. Hypocrisy. Murder and mayhem are all in good fun, but the moment a character is dishonest, the moment they express public disapproval of something they themselves do in private, that's when you know they're the real villain. Cops swarm the party, but the guests are ready, and they kill and eat the police. This is going to be a recurring theme. Things never go well for cops in John Waters films. Divine seeks revenge by heading to the Marbles' home. Check out that poster for the Queen on the wall, and licking everything in sight.
Oh, this is where they eat crackers. This is where they shove dirty little portions of bacteria down their wheezy little throats.
But while they're engaged in a little sungs out, tongues out, what are the Marbles up to?
The Battle of Filth has been won!
Oh, just burning down Divine's home.
That escalated quickly.
Clearly, there's a difference between their ideas of filth. Divine is gross, sure, but not all that destructive. But the Marbles go for scorched earth, literally. They're not just filthy, they're mean. Also, when they shot this scene, they all assured the neighbors that they were coordinating with the local fire department, which was not true at all. Look how close that torch comes to actually setting Mink Stole on fire. To me, that's more shocking than anything that appears in the movie. Anyway, when the Marbles return home, they're captured by Divine and her family. And here's where Connie and Raymond cross one more line.
No, please, you must be mistaken. Our name is Waldo. Harry and Jean Waldo.
The Marbles pretend to be someone else, denying who they truly are. This is what sets them apart from Divine's family. The moment it's convenient, the Marbles pretend to be someone they're not. But Divine is always true to herself. In fact, once she captures the Marbles, she summons the media to brag about how disgusting she is, leading to one of my favorite movie speeches of all time.
Could you give us some of your political beliefs?
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat Filth are my politics. Filth is my life.
I wish every politician was that direct. This speech really sums up the philosophy that would guide John's work. Not that murder and cannibalism are something to be admired, but that honesty and shamelessness are. Divine's saying exactly what she believes. She's holding nothing back. She's incapable of being ashamed of who she is. I think one reason a character with these qualities resonated with audiences is that this film came out just 3 years after Stonewall, and in the middle of the first Pride parades, or as they were often called back then, Liberation Day or Freedom Day parades. After decades of moral guardians holding queer people back, there were suddenly raucous parades all over the country, touched off by a riot to resist the police. This was a liberated movie for liberating times. And nobody's more liberated than Divine, who decides that the characters who try to hide their true natures must be punished.
These two people must be humiliated in front of the media.
The fact the Marbles can be humiliated proves that they're not really as gloriously filthy as they'd claimed. If they were, they'd just love the attention. And in fact, we'll see a character who's delighted to be publicly condemned in John's next film. After executing the Marbles, Divine and company decide to relocate to Boise, which in real life was the site of a recent moral panic over homosexuality, and on their way out of town, there's one last gag.
Watch, as Divine proves that not only is she the filthiest person in the world, she is also the filthiest actress in the world.
The last shot of the film is the one you've probably heard of, the one where Divine takes her own advice. Enduring this final shock was a badge of honor for adventurous moviegoers, and celebrating it put you in the proud company of the filthiest filmgoers alive. After all, this was a new age for cinema.
It was because that was the year of porno chic. That was the year that hardcore pornography finally became legal. Exploitation was over.
Proudly proclaiming that you'd gone to see Deep Throat or Pink Flamingos was a sign of sophistication and good taste in certain circles. Or at the very least, it told people that you weren't a pearl-clutching prude.
I think it's the future of city living.
Pink Flamingos firmly establishes the John Waters philosophy at the start of the 1970s, that shamelessness is next to godliness. After it came out, John says people kept asking him what he could possibly do to top Pink Flamingos. And the answer is the rest of the trinity of trash: Female Trouble in 1974, in which shamelessness is rewarded even beyond death, and Desperate Living in 1977, in which shamelessness triumphs over fascism. Let's look at Female Trouble next. Divine is back. This time she's a high school student, which is as plausible as anything else in most teen movies. Divine plays Dawn Davenport, a teenager with attitude.
Who cares if we fail? I want to quit now. I am, right after I get my Christmas present.
Juvenile delinquents are a long-running fascination for John Waters, who grew up on movies about teenage criminals and women in prison. Plus, he was a bit of a delinquent himself. His own high school asked him to skip his graduation ceremony because he looked like a hippie. John would go on to put troubled teens in later movies like Hairspray and Cry Baby, but Dawn is one of his most troubled. She only has one thing on her mind.
My parents better give me them cha-cha heels I asked for. That's all I can say. My parents are going to be real sorry if I don't get them cha-cha heels. I better get them cha-cha heels.
I'm gonna be honest, I've been a fan of John Waters for decades, and I have no idea what cha-cha heels are. This movie has become so iconic that when you try to look them up, all you get is pictures of Divine. So anyway, does she get them?
Those aren't the right kind. I told you cha-cha heel, black ones. Nice girls don't wear cha-cha heels.
If you say so. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but Dawn isn't a nice girl.
I hate you. I hate the doubt. I hate Christmas. Not on Christmas.
Dawn runs away from home in a fury. She's picked up by herself out of drag, and after a tryst on a rain-soaked mattress, she's giving birth on an old sofa. I should have warned you to buckle up. This movie is structured like a fast-moving car crash.
How many times have I told you it's like car accident outside?
Next, we're introduced to Dawn's neighbors, a hairdresser named Gator and his Aunt Ida. Ida asks if he's dating any of the boys in the hair salon, and I love this dialogue so much.
All those beauticians and you don't have any boy dates?
I don't want any boy dates.
Oh, honey, I'd be so happy if you turned Nellie.
When Female Trouble came out, it was pretty unthinkable that a character would be encouraged to be gay. But this film is taking a protest slogan of the time, gay is good, and making it way more radical. To Ida, gay isn't just good, it's great.
I'm worried that you work in an office, have children, celebrate wedding anniversaries. The world of heterosexual is a sick and boring life.
Obviously, this is a parody of those scenes where a kid comes out and their parents tell them how worried they are that queer life is going to be so difficult. You might know those speeches. I know them because I got one when I came out, about all the dangers I'd have to watch out for as a gay man, how I should be concerned about who might find out about me. And I do appreciate the concern, but I'll be honest, gay life is pretty fantastic, so don't worry, we're good. Anyway, with this speech, Female Trouble exists in a kind of opposite universe from real life. And this is just one of many inversions in the film. Dawn runs into another inversion when she visits a hair salon, an exclusive place where only the finest clients are accepted.
I'm a thief and a shit kicker, and I'd like to be famous.
The salon's owners are Donald and Donna Dasher, and they love what they see. They want to take glamour shots of Dawn committing crimes.
We have a theory that crime enhances one's beauty.
As luck would have it, crime and beauty are Dawn's two favorite things. The photo shoots commence, only taking a brief break when Aunt Ida, angry that Dawn has caused Gator to move away, throws acid in her face, but the acid only heightens her gorgeousness.
I love crime too, especially the excitement of getting away with it.
These photos will be art, hardcore art.
Just think of it. House robbing, nude gowns, murder, scars, fingerprints, lashes.
But then Dawn goes a little too far. As her fame escalates, she gets a one-woman show that consists of her bouncing on a trampoline, smearing herself with fish, and then killing the audience.
Who wants to be famous? Who wants to die for art?
I do.
Little does she know that the cops have been tipped off to the show by Dawn's daughter.
I want you to go immediately to the police. Tell the police everything.
Cops show up as soon as the first murder takes place. They're pointing their guns everywhere. This is oddly similar to an episode of Murder, She Wrote that's set at a drag club. And what's that I see in the background? Pink flamingos! Coincidence? Probably. Anyway, Divine is chased down like it's the end of a monster movie. Remember what John said?
I want him to be the Godzilla of drag queens.
She's captured and put on trial to her utter delight. She's more famous than ever.
Can't you stupid people see? I'm a huge star. Just pick up the papers and you'll see my picture on the front page.
This whole sequence was inspired by John's real-life obsession with trials. He went to the trials for the Manson family and used what he saw in the film. In fact, Big Show trials would become a recurring theme in a lot of his work.
Do you recycle?
No. I don't have room in my kitchen.
During the trial, the Dashers turn on her, pretending that they were innocent bystanders. Just like in Pink Flamingos, it's the hypocrites who are the real villains here, the ones who can't be honest about who they truly are.
Donna and I were terrified, but stood by helplessly.
Divine, on the other hand, is thrilled to confess.
Yes, I did, and I'm proud of it.
She's found guilty, very guilty, and sentenced to die in the electric chair, which she considers another huge win.
I feel lucky to receive the death penalty. Why, it's the biggest award I could get in my field.
And honestly, she's not wrong. Odd as it is, this movie predicted the popularity of true crime. That was already a thing in John Waters' time, but now it's blown up into an entire genre. Today, audiences can't get enough of famous murders. The more lurid, the better. Dawn is absolutely right that she found a way to become a star. So the day that she's brought to the chair is the best day of her life. She delivers an acceptance speech, they throw the switch, the end. This is the movie's biggest inversion of all. Normally, a character dying in the end is a tragedy, but for Dawn, it's a triumph. She got exactly what she wanted, and it's all thanks to her shamelessness. It never even occurred to her to lie about what she did. The Dashers wanted to be famous too, but because they lied about their crimes, they just fade into obscurity. But Divine goes out exactly as she wants, at the height of her fame.
This way my legend will have to live on.
Good for her. So now we've had a film about how shamelessness is a badge of honor. We've had a film about how shamelessness can help you reach your dreams. Now it's time for 1977's Desperate Living, which is about how shamelessness can bring about radical revolution and the defeat of fascism. We begin in an affluent Baltimore suburb where all is not well. A housewife named Peggy Gravel has come home from the mental hospital, but her release may have been a bit premature.
Trying to kill me in my own home! It's like war! Don't tell me I don't know what Vietnam is like!
Peggy is basically what happens if conservative politics go fully unmasked. She's terrified that people are trying to take something from her, like when she gets a call from a wrong number.
How can you ever repay the 30 seconds you have stolen from my life?
Or when she sees kids playing in her yard.
Go home to your mother! Doesn't she ever watch you? Tell her this isn't some communist daycare center!
She's convinced that everyone is out to get her, from powerful officials
I hate the Supreme Court!
to the neighbors.
Tell your mother I hate her! Tell your mother I hate you!
When she catches the kids innocently playing doctor, she flies into a ridiculous moral panic.
God! The children are having sex!
The person looking after Peggy is their maid, Griselda, and you can tell that Peggy's husband is evil because when he discovers Griselda stealing toilet paper, first he makes some extremely racist remarks, and then he does what every villain in a John Waters movie does.
I'm gonna call the police and report you!
But he never gets the chance. Peggy's convinced that he's trying to attack her, so she and Griselda kill Mr. Gravel and then flee into the countryside. They're the original Thelma and Louise. Like Thelma and Louise, they're pulled over by a cop. But unlike Thelma and Louise, the cop demands their underwear. It's a scene that might be shocking, but apparently cop stealing underwear is just a thing that happens kind of frequently. At any rate, the cops tell him to go to a nearby town called Mortville.
That's a special town for people like you two. People who should be so embarrassed by what they've done.
A town for people who should be so embarrassed. A place where your shame becomes a literal prison. Subtle, John. They arrive and they meet Mole McHenry, a wrestler ashamed to have killed a man in the ring, and also ashamed of what she thinks is her inability to satisfy her girlfriend Muffy. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Muffy's personal shame is that her babysitter put her kid in the fridge, and then Muffy got mad and suffocated the babysitter in a bowl of dog food, and then drove away with her husband's head stuck in the car window, strangling him. Okay, that one is a little more complicated, but at the end of the day, it's still weighing her down.
I can never go back. I couldn't bear the shame.
Mole is convinced that Muffy is unsatisfied with her physically, and so she decides to get what she calls a sex change at Johns Hopkins, the real-life Baltimore hospital that was, at the time, one of the only places in the world that performed what we now call gender confirmation.
I'm a man, Muffy. A man trapped in a woman's body.
This storyline, I'm sorry to say, is unfortunate. The dialogue suggests that Mole might be trans, but then later the story suggests that Mole was really a lesbian who wanted to satisfy her bisexual partner and may have never really wanted to be a man. This plays into multiple untrue tropes that conservatives use to this day to denigrate queer people. That lesbians wish they were men, or that trans people get surgery on a whim and later regret it. It's a real bummer to see those harmful stereotypes in this movie. Ruling over all this shame is the evil Queen Carlotta.
Hi, stupid! Hi, ugly!
Carlotta's greatest joy is controlling the lives of the people in Mortville through a violent police force. The day that Peggy and Griselda arrive, Carlotta declares it Backwards Day and that everyone has to wear their clothes backwards or be killed.
Hey, moron! You got your clothes on backwards!
John's previous films all involve some level of inversion. Bad is good, ugly is beautiful, but now he's making it literal with a childish cartoon villain declaring an opposite day. Peggy senses a kindred spirit in Carlotta.
Dealing with the poor people is a waste of time. Only the rich should be allowed to live.
I like your politics, Mrs. Gravel.
What politics are those? Oh, you know, fascism. That's not an exaggeration. It's literally what Peggy says later on. For now, they come up with a scheme to give everyone in Mortville rabies in a scene that's not all that different from current right-wing fantasies about vaccines.
Tomorrow is the first day of mass immunization. Or at least that's what the morons of Mortville think.
It's an anti-vax fever dream that an evil witch is putting rabies in vaccines. How oddly timely. Mole and Muffy learn about the scheme from Carlotta's daughter. They storm the castle, they kill the guards, they confront Carlotta and Peggy.
Oh, that's right there, Royal! Oh,
get out of my chambers, lesbian!
It's here that Peggy makes her last stand.
A single gunshot can never destroy the beauty of fascism!
A single bullet? No, but you know what might? An uprising. The people of Mortville have reached a breaking point. They kill the cops, they declare an end to unjust laws, and they elevate Muffy to their queen.
Queen Carlotta is dead. Your days of humiliation have come to an end. Mortville is at last a free city.
And they even eat the queen to celebrate. A surprisingly uplifting ending for a John Waters film. But it's not really the end, because these movies were at the forefront of a huge change in the way that gay characters were portrayed on screen. A shift that was only just getting started. All three of these films feature queer heroines who proudly declare who they are out in the open, something that audiences would come to admire more and more in the ensuing decades. Previously, queer characters might be timid or ashamed of who they are, like in Boys in the Band.
You're a homosexual and you don't want to be. But there's nothing you can do to change it.
Or they might be polite and well-behaved, like nearly everyone in The Queen. In fact, the showstopper of that documentary is Crystal LaBeija, who calls out the pageant authorities for unfair judging.
See, I don't say she's not beautiful, but she wasn't looking beautiful tonight. She doesn't equal me. Look at her makeup. It's terrible.
And loudly, shamelessly declares what she is.
I am beautiful, and I know I'm beautiful.
In the years that followed, we'd see a new kind of queer character on screens, ones who are unashamedly open about who they are. From Rocky Horror in '75,
I'm just a sweet transvestite,
to La Cage on Broadway in '83,
life's not worth a damn till you can shout out loud, I am what I am.
to a show as mainstream as Golden Girls with Blanche's brother Clayton.
Blanche, we don't have to worry about what the world thinks about our relationship. It just doesn't matter because we're there for each other. I'd do anything for Doug, and he'd bend over backwards for me.
What was once shocking was becoming popular. And creators who were shocking got popular too. As you get into the 80s and 90s, you could see John Waters and Divine having a big impact on pop culture. Not in underground theaters and midnight movies, but in mainstream culture. When Disney animators started working on The Little Mermaid, they struggled to find a look for the movie's villain, Ursula the Sea Witch. In some early versions, she was slender and opulent. In others, she looks kind of cuddly. In one version, I don't really know what's going on here. But Howard Ashman, the film's producer and songwriter, and a Baltimore native, was a big fan of John Waters and Divine. He suggested that they steer the character of Ursula toward a giant lady with a growling voice and massive eyebrows, and even similar hair. And as soon as they saw the result, that was that. They found their Ursula. And John Waters himself found his way into the mainstream when he guested on one of the most popular sitcoms on television. The writers of The Simpsons wanted to have an episode where Bart might be gay. Just like with Howard Ashman, a lot of them were John Waters fans and decided to write him into the show as a character who teaches The Simpsons about homosexuality. It's honestly a very sweet episode, but as always seems to happen with John, it ran into problems with his old friends, the censor board. The network's Standards and Practices Department tried to block the episode from airing, saying that the topic of homosexuality was, quote, unacceptable for broadcast.
Hot stuff coming through.
So the showrunners decided to take a chance. They went ahead with production anyway, hoping that they'd find a way to get it on the air. And as luck would have it, just around that time, the president of Fox got fired and replaced, along with all of the censors. The new team decided the episode was perfectly fine, and not only did John's episode air, it was watched by 15 million people and won an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. But the biggest mainstreaming of John's work is probably Hairspray, a 1988 movie starring Divine that was adapted for Broadway by the songwriting couple Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman. The show was a huge hit, winning 8 Tonys, but Mark and Scott caused a bit of a scandal when they accepted their Tony.
I love this man. We're not allowed to get married in this world. I don't know why, but I would like to declare in front of millions of people, I love you, and I'd like to live with you the rest of my life.
That kiss was a bit of a controversy when it aired in 2003. Viewers sent angry letters. Mark and Scott got criticized by Broadway legend Fred Ebb, who'd written a ton of music for Liza Minnelli of all people back in the 70s.
When Fred Ebb was interviewed, he said he thought we made a spectacle of ourselves.
Didn't we?
It was dumb. The bedroom is not the screen.
If you don't think two men should be allowed to kiss at the Tony Awards, I just don't know what to say to you. Anyway, I think it's fitting that the musical team behind Hairspray managed to shock people, carrying on the tradition that John established with his own early films in the 60s and 70s.
Come on. You'll see two actual queers kissing each other like lovers on the lips. These are actual queers.
In 2003, that kiss was shocking. Now it seems like no big deal. Hairspray itself was once deemed daring and bold. Now it's performed in high schools around the country. And that, John says, makes it his most devious film yet.
Because it crossed over. In every high school in America, they're doing Hairspray now, which is two men singing a love song to each other, a movie that encouraged your white teenage daughter to date black guys. But no one notices that that's the message. They embrace it, and I somehow snuck that over.
There's an unlikely morality to all of John's work. His heroes are all completely honest about who they are, no matter their flaws. They never let anyone else hold them back. His later work is what broke through to the mainstream, but beneath all the sex and cannibalism and filth, his early films have a childlike sincerity. And that's John Waters, putting the whole in wholesome. By the way, you probably won't be surprised to learn that in making this video, I gathered a lot of stories about John Waters and underground movies and Divine that were a little too hot for YouTube. But if you'd like to hear more about going Christmas caroling with criminals, running into Hollywood stars at adult theaters, and the one scene that got John arrested in the middle of filming, I'll be posting additional videos about all that over on Patreon. Check that out at patreon.com/mattbaum, and subscribe to my newsletter at mattbaum.com for sneak peeks at what I'm working on next and other little fun tidbits that I discover. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to take this call.
I'm a divorced woman. Please help me.